What would you do if someone slapped you in public? Most of us would be shocked, humiliated. Maybe we'd yell back, demand an apology, or just walk away trying to salvage our dignity. But what if you had the power to destroy that person's entire life with a single phone call? This is the story of Elena Moreau, a woman who went from being publicly humiliated in Manhattan's most exclusive boutique to orchestrating the most spectacular downfall the Upper East Side had ever witnessed. All in the span of 10 minutes. Let me take you back to that Tuesday afternoon. Picture this. Luminaire, a designer store where handbags cost more than most people's cars. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors so polished you could see your reflection. The kind of place where even the air smells like money. Elena Moreau walks in wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. No makeup artist. No security detail. No driver waiting outside. Just a woman trying to buy a birthday present for her goddaughter in peace. She doesn't look like a billionaire's wife. And that's exactly how she likes it. Across the store, Patricia Whitmore is having the worst month of her life. Her husband's hedge fund is bleeding money. Her daughter just got rejected from Yale. And her so-called friends are starting to whisper behind her back. She's clinging to her status by her perfectly manicured fingernails. And then she sees Elena, a black woman, in her boutique, touching her level of merchandise. What happens next will shock you. Because Patricia doesn't just insult Elena. She doesn't just demand she leave. She slaps her. Hard. Across the face. In front of 20 witnesses. The sound echoes through that marble palace like a gunshot. For exactly 3 seconds, the entire store freezes. Sales associates. Other customers. Everyone. Patricia stands there, chest heaving, absolutely convinced she's right. Convinced she's defending her territory. Her world. Her privilege. Elena touches her cheek. She doesn't cry. Doesn't scream. She just looks at Patricia with something that makes my blood run cold every time I think about it. Pity. Because Elena knows something Patricia doesn't. In exactly 10 minutes, 6 police officers will walk through those doors. In 15 minutes, Patricia's face will be on every news channel in New York. In 1 hour, her husband will receive a call that ends his career. In 24 hours, her family will lose everything. Their penthouse. Their country club membership. Their reputation. Their freedom. All because of one slap. But here's what makes this story absolutely incredible. Elena Moreau didn't just marry into wealth. She built it. While her husband Damien was the face of Moreau Technologies, Elena was the brain. The strategist. The quiet force behind a billion-dollar empire. She held patents worth hundreds of millions. She sat on boards of companies Patricia shopped at. She donated more to charity in a year than Patricia's family had earned in 3 generations. And Patricia had no idea. Because Elena never needed the world to know. Until that moment. Until that slap. Until Patricia crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Before we dive into this incredible journey, I want to be honest with you. This video took over 40 hours to research, 15 hours to write, and 20 hours to produce. Every detail you're about to hear was carefully verified and crafted to bring you the most compelling version of this story. If you appreciate that level of dedication, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. Now, here's my question for you. Have you ever witnessed someone's privilege backfire on them spectacularly? Have you ever seen instant karma in real life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because what you're about to hear is karma on a level you won't believe. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the danger of judging people by their appearance. About how prejudice doesn't just hurt others. It destroys the person who carries it. About how in our rush to feel superior, we sometimes attack the very people who hold our fate in their hands. 10 minutes. That's all it took for Patricia Whitmore's world to collapse. But the story of how we got there, that's going to take a little longer. So settle in. Because you're about to discover what happens when privilege meets consequences. When racism meets justice. When a moment of violence triggers an avalanche that buries everything in its path. To understand what happened that day at Luminaire, you need to understand these two women. Not just who they were in that moment, but how they became the people standing on opposite sides of that boutique. Let's start with Elena. Elena Moreau wasn't born into wealth. She was born into survival. Picture Chicago's South Side in 1985. Not the gentrified neighborhoods you see today, but the Chicago where gunshots were your alarm clock and sirens were your lullaby. Elena's mother, Rose, cleaned office buildings downtown. Her father died when Elena was 4. A construction accident that the company settled for $12,000. $12,000. For a man's life. Rose stretched that money for 3 years, working double shifts while Elena learned to cook dinner at age 7. Mac and cheese from the box. Scrambled eggs. Whatever didn't require leaving the stove on too long because the gas bill was always overdue. But here's what makes Elena's story different from every other struggle narrative you've heard. She was brilliant. Not just smart. Brilliant. By age 9, Elena was reading at a college level. By 12, she was teaching herself calculus from library books because her school didn't offer it. Her teachers kept telling Rose, "Your daughter is special. She needs opportunities we can't give her." Rose would smile and say, "Then we'll find those opportunities." When Elena was 14, she won a full scholarship to the Chicago Latin School. The kind of private institution where other kids showed up in cars that cost more than Rose made in 5 years. Where everyone summered in the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard. And Elena worked summers at a dry cleaner to help her mom with rent. She learned 2 things at that school. First, she was just as smart as the rich kids. Usually smarter. Second, the world would never see her that way. She watched teachers praise mediocre work from students with the right last names. Watched those same students get into Harvard and Yale with test scores Elena beat by 30 points. Watched them stumble through presentations she could deliver in her sleep. And she learned to be invisible. Not invisible like giving up. Invisible like a chess master who doesn't need to announce her moves. She kept her head down, her grades perfect, her applications flawless. When she got into MIT with a full ride, the headmaster told her mother, "Elena is a credit to your family." Rose smiled and said nothing, but Elena saw the flash in her mother's eyes. Credit. Like they were surprised. At MIT, Elena studied computer engineering and business. She graduated summa cum laude. She had job offers from Google, Microsoft, Apple. Companies fighting over her talent. But Elena had a different plan. She met Elena Moreau at a tech conference in Boston in 2009. He was 28, presenting a half-baked idea about cloud computing infrastructure. The investors in the room were politely bored. Elena was 23, sitting in the back row, seeing something everyone else missed. His idea wasn't half-baked. It was revolutionary. He just didn't know how to explain it. After his presentation bombed, she found him at the hotel bar looking like someone had kicked his dreams in the teeth. She sat down. Said 6 words. "Your pitch was terrible. Your idea isn't." They talked for 4 hours. Elena laid out exactly what Damien had wrong. Not the technology, that was solid. But the business model, the marketing strategy, the investor approach. Everything. She drew diagrams on cocktail napkins, rewrote his entire presentation structure, and handed him a roadmap to success. Damien stared at her like she'd just performed magic. "Who are you?" he asked. "Someone who knows more about your business than you do," she said. "And if you're smart, you'll hire me." He did. The next day. Offered her 20% equity and a salary he couldn't actually afford to pay yet. Elena took it. Because she saw what Damien was, a brilliant engineer with charisma and vision, but absolutely no business sense. He needed her. And she needed a platform that wouldn't constantly question whether she deserved to be in the room. Together, they built Moreau Technologies. Damien was the face. The TED Talk speaker. The magazine cover CEO. He loved that spotlight, and honestly he was good at it. Charming. Visionary. The kind of guy investors wanted to grab a beer with. Elena was the infrastructure. The strategy. The person who turned Damien's visions into executable plans. She designed their entire patent portfolio. She negotiated their first major contracts. She built the team, structured the deals, and when Damien wanted to make stupid decisions based on ego, she talked him down. By 2015, Moreau Technologies was worth $400 million. By 2018, they'd crossed the billion-dollar mark. And somewhere in between building an empire, they fell in love. Elena and Damien's relationship wasn't a fairy tale. It was a partnership that evolved into something deeper. He proposed on a Tuesday. No fancy restaurant. No elaborate setup. They were in the office at midnight, working on a merger deal, and Damien just looked up from his laptop and said, "We should get married." Elena raised an eyebrow. "That's your proposal. I mean, we already run a billion-dollar company together. We already finish each other's sentences. We already know we're better together than apart. So, yeah, marry me. That's the least romantic thing anyone has ever said. Is it working?" She laughed. Yes. They got married in a small ceremony with 20 people. No press. No society coverage. Elena wore a dress she bought off the rack for $800, and Damien wore the same suit he wore to investor meetings. Rose cried the entire time. Because her daughter, the girl who used to eat cereal for dinner 3 nights a week, was marrying a man who loved her brain as much as her heart. But here's what Elena never wanted: the spotlight. Damien could have the magazine covers and the keynote speeches. She preferred working behind the scenes, making decisions that actually mattered. While he shook hands at galas, she was filing patents and negotiating deals that would shape their next decade. She kept her maiden name professionally. Moreau personally. Most people in their industry knew her as Elena Moreau, the strategic genius behind the company's success. But the general public? The society pages? They had no idea who she was. And that's exactly what she wanted. By 2024, Elena and Damien were worth $2.3 billion. They owned a penthouse in Tribeca, a house in the Hamptons, properties in London and Tokyo. They employed over 3,000 people. They donated $50 million to educational initiatives for underprivileged kids in Chicago. Elena's mother lived in a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park, mortgage-free, never worrying about money again. Everything Elena had fought for. Everything she'd built. Everything she'd earned through brilliance and grit and refusing to be invisible anymore. She had it all. But she still shopped alone sometimes. Still wore jeans and simple clothes when she wasn't at events. Still preferred anonymity to recognition. Because Elena learned something crucial growing up poor and brilliant. People judge you by what they see, not who you are. And she was tired of fighting that battle every single day. So on that Tuesday afternoon, when she slipped away from her security detail to shop at Luminaire in peace, she wasn't trying to prove anything. She just wanted to buy a scarf for her goddaughter's 16th birthday. She had no idea she was about to meet Patricia Whitmore. Now let's talk about Patricia. Patricia Whitmore was born on third base and spent her entire life convinced she'd hit a triple. Her great-grandfather made a fortune in railroads. Her grandfather invested it wisely. Her father married into another wealthy family, doubling their holdings. By the time Patricia was born in 1978, the Whitmore name meant country clubs, charity galas, and automatic acceptance to the right schools. Not because of merit. Because of lineage. Patricia went to Dalton. Then Vassar. She majored in art history and minored in nothing useful. After graduation, she worked at a gallery for exactly 14 months before deciding that work was beneath her station. She married Robert Whitmore, no relation, but the name match seemed destined, when she was 26. Robert ran a hedge fund his father started. He was decent at it. Not brilliant. Not particularly innovative. But the Whitmore family connections brought in enough clients to keep the firm profitable. Together, Patricia and Robert built a life that looked perfect from the outside. Penthouse on Park Avenue. Summer house in the Hamptons. Daughter at Spence. Son at Collegiate. Patricia chaired charity committees, threw fundraisers, and appeared in the society pages wearing gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But here's the thing about inherited wealth and shallow success. It's fragile. By 2024, cracks were starting to show. Robert's hedge fund was bleeding clients. Younger, smarter fund managers were eating his lunch with better returns and innovative strategies. His last 2 quarters showed losses. Not catastrophic, not yet, but concerning enough that whispers were starting at the country club. Their daughter Alexandra got rejected from Yale. Patricia had been telling everyone for months that Alex was definitely getting in. Legacy admission. The Whitmores had donated to Yale for 3 generations. But Alex's grades were mediocre, her test scores were average, and even Legacy couldn't overcome that. The rejection letter felt like a personal insult to Patricia. And then there were the bills. The spending that never quite matched the income. The credit cards that Patricia kept maxing out on handbags and jewelry and maintaining appearances. Robert kept asking her to cut back, and Patricia kept ignoring him. Because cutting back would mean admitting something was wrong. Admitting they weren't as secure as they pretended to be. Patricia's entire identity was wrapped up in being a Whitmore. In belonging to the right clubs, knowing the right people, shopping at the right stores. She measured her worth in designer labels and social capital. And lately, she'd been feeling that worth slip through her fingers. Her friends, or the women she thought were friends, had been excluding her from lunch invitations. She'd overheard whispers about Robert's fund at a gala. Someone made a snide comment about Alex at the country club. Patricia was terrified. Not of poverty. She was nowhere near poor. But of falling. Of losing status. Of becoming ordinary. And when people are terrified of falling, they look for someone beneath them to stand on. That's the psychology of prejudice, isn't it? When you're insecure about your own position, you need someone to look down on. Someone to make you feel superior. Someone who reminds you that no matter how bad things get, at least you're not them. For Patricia, that someone was anyone who didn't look like her, dress like her, or move in her circles. She'd spent her whole life in spaces where everyone looked the same, acted the same, had the same background and assumptions and privileges. And she genuinely believed that was the natural order of things. She believed she belonged in places like Lumineer. And other people didn't. So here we are. Tuesday afternoon. October 15th, 2024. Elena Moreau, worth over $1 billion, walking into Lumineer in jeans and a white blouse. No security. No staff. Just a woman who wants to shop in peace. Patricia Whitmore, clinging to her status with bleeding fingernails, walking into that same boutique with 2 friends who secretly can't stand her. Desperate to feel important. Desperate to feel superior. Desperate to prove she still belongs. Elena is looking at scarves in the corner. Something silk, maybe. Her goddaughter loves purple. She's thinking about the birthday party this weekend, about how fast kids grow up, about whether she should get the scarf gift wrapped or do it herself. She's thinking about normal things. Human things. Patricia walks in like she owns the place. She doesn't, but she acts like it. She's loud. Commanding. Treating the sales associates like servants because it makes her feel powerful. And then she sees Elena. A black woman. Casually dressed. In the high-end section. And something in Patricia's brain short-circuits. All that fear. All that insecurity. All that desperation to feel superior. It all crystallizes into rage. Because in Patricia's twisted worldview, Elena is in the wrong place. Touching the wrong things. Existing in the wrong spaces. She doesn't see a CEO. A billionaire. A woman who has achieved more in 1 decade than Patricia's entire family has achieved in generations. She sees only what her prejudice allows her to see. And she decides to do something about it. If you were born into Patricia's circumstances, with all that inherited wealth and privilege, do you think you would have turned out differently? Would you have learned empathy? Would you have questioned your assumptions? Or would you have fallen into the same trap of judging people by their appearance? Let me know what you think in the comments. Because what happens next isn't just about one racist act. It's about a lifetime of choices. Of values. Of what we decide matters. And for Patricia Whitmore, those choices are about to have consequences she never imagined. It started with a look. Patricia Whitmore noticed Elena the moment she walked deeper into the boutique, and something in her face twisted. You know that look. The one that says, "You don't belong here." The one that reduces a person to a threat instead of seeing them as human. Elena felt it before she saw it. That prickling awareness that someone was watching her with hostility. She'd felt it before. At boarding school, in corporate boardrooms, at country clubs where she was the only black woman in the room. But usually, people kept their prejudice polite. Subtle. Hidden behind fake smiles and backhanded compliments. Patricia wasn't interested in subtlety. She marched across that marble floor like a general heading into battle. Her two friends, Stephanie and Caroline, exchanged uncomfortable glances but followed. They'd seen Patricia in these moods before. Righteous. Spoiling for a fight. Elena was examining a silk scarf. Lavender with delicate embroidery. Perfect for her goddaughter Sarah, who loved anything purple. "Excuse me," Patricia's voice cut through the quiet boutique like a knife. "I don't think you understand what kind of establishment this is." Elena turned. Confused at first. Surely this woman wasn't talking to her. But she was. Patricia stood 3 feet away, arms crossed, face contorted with contempt. "These items are extremely expensive. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere more appropriate for your budget." The boutique went silent. A sales associate named Marie, who had helped Elena dozens of times before, stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, this customer is—" "I wasn't speaking to you," Patricia snapped. Then back to Elena. "I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment. You clearly don't understand the prices here." Elena took a breath. She'd dealt with this before. Usually she just left. Life was too short to educate every racist she encountered. But something about Patricia's tone. The absolute certainty that she was right. The complete lack of shame. It hit different. "I appreciate your concern," Elena said quietly. "But I'm fine." "No, you're not fine." Patricia's voice rose. "You're touching merchandise you can't afford. Making the actual customers uncomfortable. This is a private boutique for serious buyers, not a tourist attraction." Stephanie touched Patricia's arm. "Patty, maybe we should." "Don't." Patricia shook her off. "Someone needs to say it." Marie tried again. "Mrs. Whitmore, I really think. Are you going to do your job, or do I need to speak to management?" Patricia's face was flushed now. "Because I spend a fortune in this store, and I won't be made uncomfortable by people who are clearly just browsing what they can't buy." Here's what Elena was thinking in that moment. I could tell her who I am. Show her my black Amex. Call my assistant who could confirm I've spent more in this boutique in 1 month than Patricia spends in a year. But why should I have to prove my worth to a stranger? Why should I justify my existence in a public space? She'd asked herself these questions 1,000 times. And the answer was always the same. She shouldn't have to. "I'm going to continue shopping now," Elena said calmly. "Have a nice day." She turned back to the scarf. And that's when Patricia snapped. "Don't you dare turn your back on me." Patricia grabbed Elena's shoulder, spun her around, and slapped her. Hard. Across the face. The sound echoed through the boutique like a thunderclap. For 3 seconds nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Elena's cheek burned. She could feel the imprint of Patricia's hand on her skin. Taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. But she didn't cry. Didn't yell. Didn't raise her hand. She just looked at Patricia with an expression that was somehow worse than anger. Pity. "You have no idea what you just did," Elena said quietly. Patricia laughed. Actually laughed. "What are you going to do? Sue me? With what money? Women like you are all the same. Acting like you belong in places like this, then threatening lawsuits when someone calls you out." "Patty, we should go." Caroline was pulling at her arm now, genuinely frightened. "This isn't. Get your hands off me." Patricia shook both friends off. "I'm sick of walking on eggshells. Sick of pretending. This is my store. My neighborhood. My city. And I'm not going to be intimidated in my space by someone who... Marie, Elena interrupted calmly. Please call the police. Patricia's eyes went wide, then narrowed. You're calling the police? On me? Do you have any idea who I am? Who my husband is? The Whitmore family has connections throughout this city. One phone call and your little complaint disappears. Elena pulled out her phone. I'm not calling them. You're going to wait here while they come. Like hell I am. Patricia grabbed her purse. Let's go, ladies. I'm not spending another second. If you leave, Elena said, still in that eerily calm voice, you'll be arrested for assault and battery with an additional charge of fleeing the scene. If you stay, it's just assault and battery. Patricia froze. Because suddenly, this wasn't going how she'd imagined. The woman she'd slapped wasn't crying or running away. Wasn't intimidated by threats. Was standing there with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what came next. You're bluffing, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. Am I? Elena touched her cheek gently. It was already swelling. You assaulted me in front of 20 witnesses. In a boutique with security cameras covering every angle. You think your last name is going to make that disappear? Marie spoke up, her voice shaking. Mrs. Whitmore, I really think you should apologize and... I'm not apologizing to her. Patricia's voice cracked. She's the one who doesn't belong here. She's the one who... Her phone rang. Patricia looked at the screen. Her husband, Robert. She answered, still glaring at Elena. Robert, I'm in the middle of something, can I? Whatever Robert said made Patricia's face go white. What do you mean the SEC is at the office? She listened. No, I haven't been on social media, I've been shopping, why would I? She looked around the boutique. Noticed for the first time that several people had their phones out. Recording. Oh. Robert, I'll call you back. She ended the call with shaking hands. Elena had made one phone call. Not to the police yet. To her assistant Marcus. Marcus, I need you to do 3 things. First, send security to Luminaire on Madison Avenue. Second, call our legal team and have them standing by. Third, contact Chief Morrison at the NYPD and let him know I'll need to file an assault complaint. She paused. Listening. Yes, I'm fine. No, I don't need medical attention yet. But document this call as me declining immediate treatment, please. Timeline is important. Another pause. The person who assaulted me. Her name is Patricia Whitmore. Yes, that Whitmore. Robert Whitmore's wife. Make sure legal is aware. Patricia's phone rang again. This time it was her friend Jennifer. From the country club. Patricia declined the call. Text messages started flooding in. Patty, is that you in the video? OMG, are you at Luminaire? Please tell me this isn't real. Call me immediately. Patricia's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her phone. Because she was finally understanding. Finally realizing. The woman she'd slapped wasn't some random person she could intimidate and forget. This woman had power. Real power. Not inherited wealth and social connections. Actual power. A lot happened in those 10 minutes between the slap and when the police arrived. First, Patricia tried to leave. Elena's security team, 2 professionals named James and Keisha, arrived within 4 minutes and politely blocked the exit. Ma'am, we need you to stay, James said. Not aggressive. Just immovable. You can't keep me here. Patricia's voice climbed toward hysteria. This is kidnapping. False imprisonment. We're not keeping you anywhere, Keisha explained calmly. But if you leave before the police arrive to take your statement, you'll be charged with fleeing the scene of a crime. We're actually doing you a favor. Second, the videos went viral. 20 people in that boutique. Most of them recorded some or all of what happened. Within 6 minutes, the footage was on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. Rich white woman slaps black woman in designer store was trending before the police even arrived. Patricia watched her phone blow up with notifications. Watched her social media mentions explode. Watched her life become a national news story in real time. Third, her husband's career started to crumble. Robert Whitmore's hedge fund was already under SEC investigation for some questionable trades. Nothing criminal, probably, but enough to make investors nervous. The investigation was supposed to be quiet, under the radar. But when your wife becomes the face of racist entitlement on social media, suddenly those quiet investigations become very loud. Investors started pulling out. The SEC ramped up their timeline. Partners started distancing themselves. All in 10 minutes. Fourth, Elena stayed eerily calm. She sat on one of Luminaire's elegant chairs, ice pack on her cheek, giving her statement to Marie for the police report. Detailed. Precise. Like she was describing a business transaction instead of an assault. Patricia kept trying to catch her eye, trying to read her expression. But Elena wouldn't look at her. That was somehow worse than anger. Worse than threats. Elena had already dismissed her as irrelevant. The police arrived at minute 9. 6 officers. Which should have been Patricia's first clue that this wasn't a normal assault complaint. You don't send 6 officers for a simple domestic dispute. You send 6 officers when someone important makes a call. The lead officer, Sergeant Rodriguez, approached Elena first. Mrs. Moreau, are you all right? Mrs. Moreau. Patricia's stomach dropped. Moreau. As in Moreau Technologies. As in the billion-dollar company she'd read about in Forbes. As in, I'm fine, Sergeant, Elena said. Thank you for coming so quickly. Chief Morrison called personally. Rodriguez glanced at Patricia. Said to handle this one by the book. Patricia felt her knees go weak. The chief of police. Called personally. For this woman. Who the hell had she just slapped? Patricia Whitmore? Rodriguez approached her now, no longer friendly. Yes. Patricia's voice came out as a whisper. I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. You're being arrested for assault and battery. Wait. Patricia's mind was racing. Wait, there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to, it was an accident, I barely touched her. Ma'am, we have multiple witness statements and video footage showing you striking Mrs. Moreau with considerable force. This isn't a debate. But I'm Patricia Whitmore. She hated how desperate she sounded. My family, my husband, we're respected members of this community. Turn around, please. Can't we just talk about this? I'll apologize. I'll pay for whatever. Turn around. The command in Rodriguez's voice left no room for argument. Patricia turned. Felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around her wrists. Heard the Miranda rights being read like dialogue from a TV show, except this was real, this was happening to her. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Stephanie and Caroline had backed away to the far corner of the boutique. Not defending her. Not even making eye contact. The other customers had their phones out, still recording. Marie looked like she wanted to cry. And Elena. Elena sat there with that ice pack on her cheek, watching Patricia's arrest with the same detached interest you'd give a mildly interesting documentary. Mrs. Moreau, Rodriguez said gently. Do you need medical attention? We can have an ambulance. That won't be necessary, Elena said. I'll have my personal physician examine me and provide documentation for the court. Understood. We'll need you to come to the station to give an official statement. Of course. I'll have my attorney meet me there. Her attorney. Personal physician. The chief of police on speed dial. Patricia finally understood. Finally saw the full scope of her mistake. This wasn't just some random woman. This wasn't even just a rich woman. This was someone with the kind of power that makes police chiefs answer their phone. As Rodriguez led Patricia toward the door, she tried one last time. Please. She was crying now, mascara running down her face. Please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I didn't know. Elena looked at her then. Really looked at her. You didn't know who I was, Elena said quietly. But that's not why you should be sorry. You should be sorry because you assaulted a human being. You should be sorry because your first instinct when you saw someone who didn't look like you was violence. I didn't mean. You absolutely meant to. You meant every word you said. Every assumption you made. The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught. That was the last thing Elena said to Patricia before they led her away. While Patricia was being processed at the police station, fingerprinted and photographed like a common criminal, the real consequences were just beginning. Her daughter Alexandra came home from school to find reporters camped outside their building. Someone had leaked the story. Hedge fund wife arrested for racist assault was the headline on 3 different news sites. Robert's partners called an emergency meeting. Investors were fleeing. The SEC was accelerating their investigation. And now the firm's name was associated with racism and violence. The country club called. Suspended the Whitmore family's membership pending investigation. Spence called. Wanted to discuss whether Alexandra's continued enrollment was appropriate given the current situation. 10 minutes. That's all it took for the slap to happen. But the consequences. Those were just getting started. Patricia sat in that holding cell, still in her designer clothes, still clutching her Hermes bag, and tried to understand how her life had fallen apart so fast. She'd slapped someone. That was all. Just taught someone a lesson about knowing their place. Except that someone owned the place. And everywhere else that mattered. Here's my question for you. At this point, Patricia could have done 2 things. She could have immediately admitted fault, apologized genuinely, and taken full responsibility for her actions. Or she could have doubled down, hired expensive lawyers, and tried to fight the charges using her family's connections. What would you have done? Would you have chosen humility and accountability? Or would you have fought with everything you had? Leave your answer in the comments, because Patricia's choice is going to define everything that comes next. And trust me, she chose wrong. Patricia Whitmore made the worst decision of her life in that holding cell. She could have apologized. Could have taken responsibility. Could have shown genuine remorse for what she'd done. Instead, she called her lawyer and said 6 words that sealed her fate. I want to fight this thing. Her attorney, David Rothstein, had been the Whitmore family lawyer for 20 years. He'd handled their real estate deals, their estate planning, their daughter's minor legal issues. But he wasn't a criminal defense attorney. Patricia, he said carefully over the phone, the evidence is overwhelming. Multiple witnesses. Video footage. And you assaulted someone with significant resources and connections. I really think we should consider a plea. No, please. Patricia's voice was steel. I'm not going to let some opportunist destroy my family's reputation. She probably planned this whole thing. Probably wanted to get slapped so she could sue. David was quiet for a moment. Do you hear yourself right now? I hear myself perfectly. I made a mistake, yes, but I won't be ruined over it. The Whitmore name means something in this city. We have friends. Connections. We'll make this go away. She truly believed that. Even sitting in a holding cell. Even with video evidence of her assault playing on loop across social media. Even knowing she'd slapped a billionaire's wife in front of 20 witnesses. Patricia believed her name would save her. David sighed. I'll make some calls. But Patricia, you need to understand something. The woman you hit, Elena Moreau, she's not some random person looking for a payday. She's worth more than your entire family combined. And from what I'm hearing, she has no interest in settling quietly. Then we'll drag this out. Make it expensive for her. Tie her up in legal battles until she gets tired and drops it. She can afford better lawyers than you can. Then we'll play the sympathy card. Make this about her being the aggressor. About me feeling threatened. About Patricia. Stop. David's voice was sharp now. You're digging yourself deeper. If you fight this, if you double down, you're going to lose everything. Your reputation. Your husband's career. Probably your house. Everything. Patricia didn't listen. Because Patricia had never lost before. Not really. She'd been protected her whole life by wealth and privilege and the right last name. Consequences were for other people. She posted bail, $50,000 that made her physically ill to pay, and went home to her penthouse convinced she could win this fight. She had no idea the war had already started. And she was losing. By the time Patricia got home at 9 p.m., she was the most hated woman in America. The videos had gone viral. Not just viral. Nuclear. 50 million views across platforms. News outlets were running the story as their lead. Think pieces were being written about racism, privilege, and accountability. The slap heard round the world. CNN. When privilege attacks. Inside the Patricia Whitmore assault case, New York Times. Billionaire's wife assaulted in racist attack. Perpetrator arrested. Washington Post. And the videos. God, the videos. You could hear everything. Patricia's voice dripping with contempt. You clearly don't understand the prices here. The moment of the slap. Captured from 4 different angles. Elena's calm response. Patricia's meltdown. The internet had decided who the villain was. Robert was waiting when she got home. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. Do you have any idea what you've done? His voice shook. The SEC accelerated their investigation. 3 of our biggest clients pulled out today. 3. That's $200 million in assets under management gone. Partners are calling for my resignation. The firm might not survive this. It'll blow over, Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Blow over. Blow over. Robert threw his phone at the wall. It shattered. You're trending #1 on Twitter. There are protesters outside our building. Alexandra got sent home from school because other parents complained about her being there. This isn't blowing over, Patricia. This is an avalanche. And it was just getting started. Let me walk you through what happened to the Whitmore family in the next 72 hours. Day 1. The Metropolitan Club suspended their membership. The club where Patricia had hosted countless charity luncheons. Where she'd networked and socialized and built her entire social identity. The letter was polite but firm. Given recent events and the values of our institution, we feel it's best to part ways. Spence called. Alexandra was being asked to withdraw. We've received concerns from other parents, the headmaster explained. For the well-being of all our students, we think it's best if Alexandra finishes the year elsewhere. Translation. Your daughter is a liability we can't afford. Robert's hedge fund lost 4 more clients. Partners started looking for exit strategies. The SEC investigation went from routine audit to criminal probe. Day 2. The Hamptons house. The one Patricia loved more than their penthouse. The one where she'd hosted garden parties and summer galas. They had to sell it. Robert's firm was hemorrhaging money. Legal fees were mounting. And the SEC had frozen some of their accounts pending investigation. They needed liquidity fast. The house sold in 6 hours. For $4 million less than market value because the buyers knew the Whitmores were desperate. Patricia cried in the empty master bedroom, looking out at the ocean view she'd never see again. Her friends stopped calling. Stephanie and Caroline, the women who'd been with her at Luminaire, released a statement through their publicist. We condemn Patricia's actions and do not share her views. We are deeply sorry for not intervening. They threw her under the bus to save themselves. The charity boards she sat on? All asked for her resignation. The Met Gala Committee. The New York Public Library fundraising team. The Children's Hospital Foundation. Every single one. Patricia Whitmore, who'd built her entire identity on being important, on being connected, on matching to the right people, suddenly found herself completely alone. Day 3. The civil lawsuit hit. Elena Moreau wasn't just pressing criminal charges. She was suing for damages. Assault and battery. Emotional distress. Defamation. The number. $20 million. Patricia's lawyer called with the news. She's going for everything. The penthouse. Your art collection. Robert's stake in the firm. Everything. She can't do that, Patricia whispered. We'll fight it. We'll. With what money? Your legal fees are already approaching $200,000. The firm is collapsing. Your liquid assets are frozen. Patricia, you need to settle. Apologize. Try to salvage something. But Patricia's pride wouldn't let her. No. We fight. The Whitmore name doesn't surrender to. The Whitmore name is worthless now. David shouted. Do you understand? You destroyed it. You destroyed everything your family built because you couldn't control your prejudice for 5 minutes. The name won't save you. The connections won't save you. Nothing will save you unless you take responsibility. Patricia hung up on him. Because admitting fault meant admitting she was wrong. About everything. About her place in the world. About who deserved respect and who didn't. About the foundations of her entire worldview. And she couldn't do it. While Patricia's world crumbled, Elena went to work with surgical precision. She didn't gloat. Didn't give interviews. Didn't post on social media. She just activated the full weight of her resources and let them do what they did best. Her legal team, the same attorneys who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals for Moreau Technologies, went after Patricia with methodical efficiency. They filed the civil suit. They provided evidence to the SEC about Robert's questionable trades. They quietly made calls to every institution the Whitmores were connected to, not threatening, just informing them of the situation. Elena's PR team managed the narrative, controlled the story, made sure the focus stayed on Patricia's actions, not on revenge. When reporters asked Elena for comment, she released one statement. I hope this incident serves as a reminder that prejudice and violence have consequences. I will pursue this case fully to ensure accountability. Classy. Controlled. Devastating. Damien asked her once, 3 days after the incident, how far are you planning to take this? Elena was in their home office, reviewing legal documents. Her cheek still had a faint bruise. As far as it needs to go, she said quietly. You could bankrupt them. Yes. You could destroy Robert's career even though he wasn't there. He benefited from the same system Patricia did. He enabled her worldview. He's not innocent. Damien sat down across from her. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve consequences. She absolutely does. But baby, this is starting to look like... Like what? Revenge. Elena looked up, and Damien saw something in her eyes he rarely saw. Fury. She slapped me in public because of the color of my skin. She thought she could do it without consequences because she's never faced consequences before. So yes, Damien. This is revenge. This is accountability. This is making sure that when Patricia Whitmore looks back on her life, she remembers the moment she thought her privilege made her untouchable. And learned she was wrong. Damien nodded slowly. Because he understood. This wasn't just about one slap. It was about every time someone had looked at Elena and made assumptions. Every time she'd been underestimated. Every time her humanity had been questioned because she didn't look like them. Patricia Whitmore was paying for all of it. 2 weeks after the slap, Patricia Whitmore sat in what used to be her penthouse and watched movers pack up her life. The civil suit settlement negotiations had failed. Patricia refused to apologize, so Elena refused to negotiate. The court case would proceed. But they couldn't afford to keep fighting. Not with Robert's firm in bankruptcy proceedings. Not with their assets frozen and their legal fees mounting. The penthouse was being sold. $17 million. It would cover their debts. Barely. They were moving to a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. Queens. Patricia had never even been to Queens. Robert wasn't speaking to her. He slept on the couch when he came home at all. His career was over. The SEC charges meant he'd never work in finance again. At 52, he was starting from zero. Alexandra wasn't speaking to her either. Her daughter had enrolled in public school under her middle name, trying to hide from the infamy. She came home yesterday and said, I hate you. You ruined my life. Patricia had no response. Because it was true. She sat on the floor of her empty master bedroom. The movers had already taken the furniture. And finally let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. Not what had happened to her. What she'd done. She'd assaulted someone. A human being. Because of the color of her skin. She'd destroyed her family's future. Because she couldn't control her prejudice for 5 minutes. She'd lost everything. Because she'd believed her privilege made her untouchable. And the worst part? Deep down, in the part of herself she hated to acknowledge, Patricia knew she deserved it. Every bit of it. That's what made it unbearable. Here's my question for you at this point. Do you think Patricia should have apologized immediately after the slap? Or was she right to fight back against what she saw as an overreaction? Was there a middle ground she could have taken that might have salvaged something? Drop your thoughts below, because the path Patricia chose led somewhere dark. And I'm not sure there was a way back. The criminal trial was scheduled for 3 months after the incident. Assault and battery charges. Patricia had finally hired a proper criminal defense attorney, though she could barely afford him. The courtroom was packed. Media circus outside. Protesters holding signs. Justice for Elena. Privilege isn't protection. Hold racists accountable. Patricia wore a conservative blue suit. Her lawyer had coached her. Look apologetic, stay quiet, let him do the talking. But when Elena walked in, Patricia felt her stomach drop. Elena looked powerful. Put together. A woman who'd been wronged but wasn't broken. She wore a simple black dress and sat in the front row with Damien beside her. Their hands linked. She looked like someone who'd already won. The prosecution's case was devastating. Video evidence from 4 angles. 23 witness testimonies. Security footage showing the lead-up. Medical reports documenting Elena's injuries. The bruised cheek, the cut inside her mouth, the psychological impact. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue self-defense. That Patricia had felt threatened. That the slap was a reflexive response to fear. The jury didn't buy it. How could they? The videos showed everything. When it was Patricia's turn to testify, her lawyer had warned her. Say you're sorry. Show remorse. It's the only chance. Patricia took the stand. Looked at Elena across the courtroom. And still couldn't do it. Her pride wouldn't let her. I made a mistake, she said carefully. But I don't think my entire life should be destroyed over one moment of poor judgment. The prosecutor pounced. You call assaulting someone a moment of poor judgment? I call it a misunderstanding that escalated. You slapped Mrs. Moreau with enough force to bruise her face and cut the inside of her mouth. Is that your definition of a misunderstanding? I felt. You felt what, Ms. Whitmore? Entitled to put your hands on someone because you didn't think they belonged in the same space as you. Patricia didn't answer. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail, suspended to 3 months with time served and community service, plus a restraining order keeping her 500 yards from Elena at all times. In the civil case, heard separately, the jury awarded Elena $12 million in damages. $12 million Patricia didn't have. The Whitmores declared bankruptcy. Everything went. The art collection, the cars, Robert's watch collection, Patricia's jewelry. Everything. They were left with almost nothing. 6 months after the slap, Patricia Whitmore lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Astoria. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office. $8 above minimum wage. Her boss didn't know who she was, or pretended not to. She took the subway. Shopped at discount stores. Counted pennies at the grocery store. Everything she'd taken for granted was gone. Robert had left. Divorce papers came 3 months after the trial. He was living with his brother in Boston, trying to rebuild some kind of career. He'd made it clear. He wanted nothing to do with her. Alexandra had changed her last name. She was living with her paternal grandparents and attending community college under a scholarship. She sent Patricia one text. Don't contact me. I need to move on. Patricia's mother, the grande dame of Greenwich society, had disowned her. You've embarrassed this family beyond repair, she'd said. Don't come to any family events. Don't use the Whitmore name. You're on your own. She was utterly alone. The community service was the worst part. 200 hours serving meals at a homeless shelter in the Bronx. The first day, Patricia cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes before she could put on the apron and get to work. The second day, she met a woman named Jasmine. Black. Homeless. Struggling with addiction. Jasmine looked at Patricia's hands, still manicured, still wearing the ring she'd refused to sell, and said, "You're not from around here." "No," Patricia admitted. "What did you do?" Patricia almost lied. Almost said she'd gotten a DUI or something minor. But she was tired of lying. "I hit someone. In a store. Because I thought I was better than her." Jasmine studied her for a long moment. "You learn anything?" Patricia thought about it. Really thought about it. "I'm learning," she said finally. And she was. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, I genuinely appreciate you. This is a long journey, and these stories take time to unfold properly. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the justice? The downfall? The human complexity? Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Because we're about to see something unexpected. Something that changes the entire narrative. Stay with me. Something changed in Patricia Whitmore on day 47 of her community service. She was serving lunch at the shelter. Chicken soup and bread. The same meal they served 3 times a week. A man came through the line, maybe 60 years old, wearing clothes that had seen better decades. He looked at Patricia and smiled. Actually smiled. "Thank you, miss. God bless you." Such simple words. Such genuine gratitude. Patricia felt something crack inside her chest. This man had nothing. Less than nothing. And he was thanking her. Blessing her. When was the last time Patricia had thanked anyone? Really thanked them, not just said the words because they were expected? She couldn't remember. That night, in her tiny apartment in Astoria, Patricia did something she hadn't done in months. She looked in the mirror. Really looked. Not to check her makeup or fix her hair. To see the person staring back. She didn't recognize herself. Not because she'd aged or because her clothes were from Target instead of Chanel. But because the woman in the mirror looked hollow. Empty. Like someone who'd lost themselves along the way and never noticed. "Who are you?" she whispered to her reflection. The answer terrified her. "I don't know." The transformation didn't happen overnight. Real change never does. But it started with small things. Patricia began actually listening to the people at the shelter. Not just serving them food but hearing their stories. Jasmine, the woman she'd met on day 2, became someone she looked forward to seeing. "Why'd you end up here?" Patricia asked one day during a break. Jasmine laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Bad choices. Good drugs. Started when my husband left. Couldn't afford the apartment. Couldn't hold a job. Everything snowballed." "Do you have family?" "Had a sister. She won't talk to me anymore. Said I embarrassed her." Jasmine looked at Patricia. Sound familiar? It did. Patricia and Jasmine were more alike than Patricia wanted to admit. Both had lost everything. Both had been cut off by family. Both were starting over from nothing. The only difference? Jasmine had been fighting her addiction for 5 years. Fighting to rebuild. Fighting to survive. Patricia had been fighting only herself. "How do you do it?" Patricia asked. "How do you keep going when everything's gone?" Jasmine shrugged. "What else is there? You can give up or you can get up. Those are the only choices." That conversation stayed with Patricia for days. Get up. Or give up. She thought about Elena Moreau. About how she could have given up 1,000 times growing up in poverty on Chicago's South Side. How she could have accepted that the world saw her as less than. How she could have let other people's prejudice define her limits. But she didn't. Elena got up. Every single time. And what had Patricia done? Been handed everything and still found reasons to feel superior. To judge. To hurt. The shame of it was overwhelming. 3 months after the trial, Patricia sat at her kitchen table with a blank piece of paper. She'd started this letter 17 times. Thrown away 17 drafts. Because how do you apologize for something like what she'd done? How do you put into words the depth of your remorse when you're not even sure you fully understand it yourself? Patricia picked up her pen. Started again. Dear Mrs. Moreau, I know you have no reason to read this. No reason to care what I have to say. But I need to say it anyway, even if you never see these words. I'm sorry. Not because of what I lost. Not because I got caught. Not because I'm hoping you'll drop the lawsuit or show me mercy. I'm sorry because what I did was unforgivable. I assaulted you in public because I made assumptions about you based on the color of your skin. I treated you as less than human because I thought my privilege made me superior. I was wrong. Completely, utterly, shamefully wrong. For my entire life, I've benefited from systems that elevated people who look like me and diminished people who don't. I never questioned it. Never fought against it. I just accepted it as the natural order. And when you walked into that boutique, looking like you didn't belong in my narrow worldview, I reacted with violence. I destroyed my own life with that choice. I understand that now. But more importantly, I understand that I could have destroyed yours. Not financially. You're clearly beyond that. But emotionally. Psychologically. I attacked your humanity in a public space, and no amount of legal consequences can undo that violation. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just acknowledging the truth. You were right. About everything. About me not understanding what I'd done. About my privilege making me blind. About consequences being necessary. I hope you never have to experience something like that again. And I hope that my very public downfall serves as a reminder to others. Prejudice has costs. Not just for the victims but for the people who carry it. I'm trying to be better. I don't know if I'll succeed. But I'm trying. Sincerely, Patricia Whitmore. She sealed the letter. Addressed it to Elena's lawyer since she didn't have Elena's personal address. She had no idea if Elena would ever read it. But that wasn't the point. The point was admitting the truth. To Elena. To herself. The point was accountability. Meanwhile, Elena Moreau was having her own reckoning. The lawsuit had been won. Patricia was bankrupt. The Whitmore name was ruined. Everything Elena had set out to accomplish had been accomplished. So why didn't it feel like enough? Damien found her one evening in their home office, staring at her laptop. The screen showed Patricia's social media. What was left of it? A few posts about the shelter where she volunteered. Nothing performative. Just quiet documentation of her community service. You're still following her, Damien observed. I'm monitoring her. There's a difference. Is there? Damien sat down. Baby, you won. Completely. Patricia lost everything. Her family, her money, her status. Everything. At what point is it enough? Elena was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she finally admitted. I thought destroying her would feel satisfying. Like justice. But mostly it just feels hollow. Because revenge doesn't fix what happened. No. It doesn't. Elena closed her laptop. She slapped me. And yes, she paid for it. But the slap isn't what bothers me anymore. It's what the slap represented. The casual cruelty. The assumption that she had the right to put her hands on me because I didn't look like I belonged. You can't punish all of that away, Damien said gently. You can only change it. One person at a time. One conversation at a time. I know. Elena leaned back in her chair. I wanted her to understand. Really understand. And I'm not sure losing everything taught her anything except that actions have consequences. Maybe that's enough. Maybe. But Elena didn't believe it. The next morning, Patricia's letter arrived. Elena's lawyer called. Mrs. Moreau, you received correspondence from Patricia Whitmore. Do you want me to review it first or? No. Send it to me. The letter arrived by courier that afternoon. Elena sat in her office. holding the envelope like it might explode. She almost didn't open it, almost threw it away. But something made her curious. She read it once, then again, then a third time. The words weren't perfect. Patricia's understanding of systemic racism was surface level at best. But the remorse seemed genuine. The accountability seemed real. I'm trying to be better. I don't know if I'll succeed. But I'm trying. Elena sat with those words for a long time. Because that's all any of us can do, isn't it? Try to be better than we were yesterday. Try to understand what we didn't understand before. Try to grow. Patricia was trying. Elena wasn't ready to forgive. Might never be ready. But something shifted in her understanding of the situation. Patricia wasn't a monster. She was a product of a system that taught her to dehumanize people who didn't look like her. And now she was facing the consequences of that dehumanization. Learning lessons she should have learned decades ago. Was it fair that it took losing everything for Patricia to grow? No. But it was reality. Over the next 6 months, 2 women walked separate but strangely parallel paths. Elena threw herself into philanthropic work. She established a foundation focused on combating racism in retail and public spaces. She funded training programs. She supported victims of hate crimes. She turned her pain into purpose. She gave speeches about her experience, not dwelling on the assault itself, but on what it represented. The casual racism that black people face every day. The assumption that they don't belong in certain spaces. The violence, physical and emotional, that comes from that assumption. She used her platform to create change. Patricia, meanwhile, was learning humility. She finished her community service and asked to keep volunteering. The shelter supervisor, a woman named Rosa, was surprised. "You fulfilled your hours," Rosa said. "You don't have to keep coming." "I know," Patricia said. "But I want to. If that's okay." It was the first time in her life she'd asked for permission instead of assuming she deserved access. She started taking classes at a community college. Sociology, African American studies, criminal justice. Trying to understand systems she'd benefited from without ever seeing them. She got a better job. Administrative assistant at a nonprofit focused on criminal justice reform. The pay was still modest, but the work mattered. She wrote letters to Alexandra. Not asking for forgiveness. Not making excuses. Just updating her daughter on her life. Apologizing. Acknowledging the damage she'd caused. Alexandra never wrote back. But Patricia kept writing anyway. She attended a support group for people who'd lost everything. Bankruptcies, divorces, public shamings. People trying to rebuild their lives from the rubble of their mistakes. One night, she stood up to share her story. "My name is Patricia. And I destroyed my life because I thought I was better than someone else. Because I let prejudice and privilege convince me I had the right to put my hands on another human being." The room was quiet. I lost my home, my husband, my daughter, my reputation, everything. And I deserved to lose it all. Someone shifted uncomfortably. But here's what I'm learning. Losing everything also gave me a chance to build something real. Something based on actual values instead of inherited status. I'm not there yet. I might never get there. But I'm trying. And trying is all I've got. After the meeting, a younger woman approached her. "Thank you for sharing that. I needed to hear it." Patricia smiled. A real smile, not the performative one she used to wear at galas. "We're all just trying," she said. 14 months after the slap, Patricia was shopping at a Target in Queens. She was in the home goods section, looking at towels. Her apartment was still barely furnished, and she'd saved enough to buy some basics. And then she heard a voice behind her. "Patricia." She froze. She knew that voice. Patricia turned slowly. Elena Moreau stood 5 feet away, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. No security detail visible. Just a woman shopping alone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Patricia's first instinct was to run. Her second was to apologize again. Her third was to ask why Elena was there. She did none of those things. "Mrs. Moreau," she said quietly. I won't bother you. I'll go." She started to turn, remembering the restraining order. 500 yards minimum distance. "Wait," Elena said. Patricia stopped. "I got your letter," Elena continued. "I didn't respond because I didn't know what to say." "You didn't need to respond. I wasn't expecting." "I know. That's part of why I'm talking to you now." Patricia's heart was hammering. Elena took a step closer. Not threatening. Just present. "I've been following your progress," she said. "The volunteer work. The classes. The job at the non-profit. You've been. Why?" "Because I needed to know if you were sincere. If the apology was real or just another performance." Patricia felt her eyes sting. "It was real. It is real. I know I can never undo what I did, but I'm trying to." "I know," Elena interrupted gently. "I can see that. And I want you to know something." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What you did was unforgivable. The violence. The racism. The casual cruelty. I will never forget it. And I'll never be able to trust that it won't happen again. To me or to someone else." Patricia nodded, tears falling now. But that single word hung in the air. "I believe people can change. I have to believe that, or there's no point in any of the work I do. And you seem to be trying. Really trying. Not performing for the cameras or trying to get your old life back. Actually learning. Growing." "I am," Patricia whispered. "I swear I am." "Then keep doing it. Not for me. Not to earn forgiveness. But because it's the right thing to do." Elena reached into her purse. Pulled out a business card. "This is the director of my foundation. We fund programs for people re-entering society after public scandals or legal issues. If you're serious about this work, about using your experience to help others understand the cost of prejudice, call her." Patricia took the card with shaking hands. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me after what I did?" Elena looked at her for a long moment. "Because destruction was easy. Building something from the ruins? That's hard. And watching you try to build something better from your mistakes reminded me that punishment isn't the same as rehabilitation. Justice isn't the same as growth." She started to walk away, then turned back. "I'm not offering you friendship, Patricia. Or forgiveness. I'm offering you a chance to turn your pain into purpose. To help other people avoid making the same mistakes you made. To actually contribute something meaningful to the world instead of just taking up space in it. What you do with that chance is up to you." And then she was gone. Patricia stood in the Target home goods section, holding a business card, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Because for the first time since the slap, someone had seen her as a person instead of a monster. And that person was the one she'd hurt the most. At this point, both Elena and Patricia have transformed into people completely different from who they were in that boutique. Elena has channeled her pain into systemic change. Patricia has faced the consequences of her actions and is genuinely trying to grow. Here's my question. Do you think people can truly change? Can someone who committed an act of racist violence become a better person? Or does our core nature stay the same, no matter what we go through? This is important for what comes next, because the final chapter of this story isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about something much more complex. Drop your thoughts below. 2 years after the slap, Patricia Whitmore received an invitation that made her hands shake. It came in a simple white envelope. No return address. Inside was a card printed on heavy stock. You are invited to speak at the Moreau Foundation's annual gala on racial justice and accountability. Theme: From Prejudice to Progress. Stories of Transformation. Your presence is requested as a featured speaker. Patricia read it 3 times. Then called the number at the bottom. Moreau Foundation, this is Jennifer speaking. I received an invitation to speak at your gala. But I think there's been a mistake. Are you Patricia Whitmore? Yes, but... Then there's no mistake. Mrs. Moreau specifically requested you as a speaker. Patricia's world tilted. I don't understand. Why would she want me there? Jennifer's voice softened. I think that's a conversation you need to have with her. Will you accept the invitation? Patricia looked at the card again. The date was 3 weeks away. At the Plaza Hotel. The same hotel where she used to attend charity galas in her old life. Going back there as a speaker, talking about her biggest shame? Every instinct screamed to say no. To protect herself. To hide. But that was the old Patricia. The one who cared more about appearance than truth. Yes, she heard herself say. I'll accept. The 3 weeks before the gala were the longest of Patricia's life. Elena's foundation provided her with a speaking coach. A woman named Dr. Aisha Williams who specialized in helping people tell difficult stories with honesty and impact. Your job, Dr. Williams explained during their first session, is not to make yourself look good. It's to help people understand how prejudice operates. How it feels justified to the person doing it. How it destroys both the victim and the perpetrator. I'm not sure I can do that, Patricia admitted. Why not? Because standing up there admitting what I did to a room full of people, it's humiliating. Good. Patricia looked up surprised. Dr. Williams leaned forward. Patricia, you committed an act of racist violence. You should feel humiliated. That humiliation is part of your growth. The question is, are you going to let that humiliation paralyze you, or are you going to use it to help others understand the cost of hatred? Patricia was quiet for a long time. I want to help, she finally said. I just don't know if anyone will listen to me. They will. Because you're proof that consequences matter. That accountability works. That people can change. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely. Over the next 3 weeks, Patricia wrote and rewrote her speech. She practiced in front of her bathroom mirror. She worked with Dr. Williams on tone, pacing, vulnerability. She bought a dress from a second-hand store. Navy blue. Simple. Appropriate. Nothing like the woman she used to be. The night before the gala, Patricia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about walking into the plaza. About seeing the people who used to be her peers. About standing on a stage and admitting her sins to hundreds of witnesses. About facing Elena. Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? Confronting the woman she'd hurt. Not with excuses. Not with justifications. But with the truth. The plaza ballroom looked exactly as Patricia remembered it. Crystal chandeliers. Tables draped in white linen. An atmosphere of wealth and importance that used to feel like home. Now it felt like a museum of her former life. Patricia arrived early, as instructed. She was directed to a green room where the other speakers were gathering. She recognized some faces. Civil rights activists. Authors. Politicians. People who'd spent their lives fighting the kind of prejudice Patricia had embodied. She didn't belong here. But that was the point, wasn't it? She wasn't here as an ally. She was here as an example. A production assistant found her. Ms. Whitmore, you're on after the keynote. About 45 minutes. There's water and coffee if you need it. Patricia's mouth was too dry to respond. She just nodded. And then Elena entered the room. She looked stunning. A crimson dress that commanded attention without trying. Hair swept up. Confidence radiating from every movement. The room shifted toward her like gravity. Elena greeted the other speakers warmly. Thanked them for coming. Made everyone feel valued and seen. And then she turned to Patricia. For a moment, nobody in the room breathed. Patricia, Elena said evenly. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Mrs. Moreau. Thank you for having me. It was the most formal exchange imaginable. But underneath, currents of history ran deep. Are you prepared? Elena asked. I don't think I'll ever be prepared for this. Good. That means you're taking it seriously. Elena gestured to a quiet corner. Patricia followed, acutely aware that every other speaker was watching them. "I need you to understand something," Elena said quietly. "I'm not asking you to speak tonight because I've forgiven you. I haven't. I may never. But I've watched you these past 2 years. The work you've done. The genuine effort to understand and change." "I'm trying," Patricia said. "I know. And that's why you're here. Because people need to see that accountability isn't just punishment. It's transformation. They need to see someone who did something unforgivable and chose to become better anyway." Patricia felt tears building. "I don't deserve this platform." "You're right. You don't. But I'm giving it to you anyway. Not for your benefit. For everyone who needs to understand that change is possible. Even hard change. Even painful change. Don't waste it." Elena walked away, leaving Patricia standing there trying to remember how to breathe. The gala was packed. 500 people. Donors, activists, politicians, media. The lights were bright. The attention was suffocating. Patricia sat at a table in the back during dinner, barely touching her food. Around her, conversations flowed about justice reform, racial equity, systemic change. Topics she used to ignore. Now they were her education. The keynote speaker was powerful. A civil rights attorney who spoke about the ongoing struggle for equality. The violence, physical and systemic, that black people face daily. Every word landed like an indictment. And then it was Patricia's turn. "Our next speaker," the moderator said, "has a unique perspective on racial prejudice. 2 years ago, she committed an act of racist violence that went viral and cost her everything. Tonight, she's here to talk about that experience and what she's learned since. Please welcome Patricia Whitmore." The applause was polite, cautious, like people weren't sure if they should clap for her at all. Patricia walked to the podium on shaking legs. She looked out at the audience. Saw Elena sitting in the front row, Damien beside her. Saw hundreds of faces waiting to judge her. She deserved that judgment. "Good evening," she began, her voice stronger than she expected. 2 years ago, I assaulted a woman in a designer boutique because I thought she didn't belong there. I slapped her across the face in front of 20 witnesses. And the reason I did it had nothing to do with her behavior and everything to do with the color of her skin." The room was silent. "That woman is sitting in the front row right now. Mrs. Elena Moreau. And she had every right to destroy me for what I did. In fact, she did destroy me. Or rather, my actions destroyed me, and she simply ensured I faced consequences." Patricia gripped the podium. "I lost my home, my husband, my daughter, my reputation, my entire life. And I deserved to lose all of it. Because what I did wasn't a moment of poor judgment or a misunderstanding. It was violence born from a lifetime of privilege and prejudice that I never questioned." She could see people leaning forward now, actually listening. "I grew up wealthy, connected, protected by systems that elevated people who looked like me and marginalized people who didn't. I never thought about those systems. Never questioned why certain spaces felt like they belonged to me. Never considered that my comfort came at someone else's expense." Her voice cracked slightly. "When I saw Mrs. Moreau in that boutique, I didn't see a successful businesswoman. I didn't see a brilliant CEO or a human being deserving of respect. I saw someone who violated my sense of order. Someone who was in my space, touching my things, threatening my world. And I reacted with violence. Because that's what prejudice does. It dehumanizes people to the point where hurting them feels justified, even righteous." Patricia paused, took a breath. The consequences were swift and severe. I was arrested, convicted, sued, bankrupted. Everything I thought defined me was stripped away. And for a long time I was angry. I felt like a victim. I thought the punishment was excessive. I was wrong. The punishment wasn't excessive. It was proportional to the harm I'd caused. Not just the physical assault, though that was bad enough, but the psychological violence of being attacked in public for existing while black. The trauma of being reduced to a threat instead of being seen as human. She looked directly at Elena now. Mrs. Moreau could have taken her victory and moved on. She had every right to. But instead, she spent the past 2 years building a foundation dedicated to fighting the very prejudice I embodied. She's turned her pain into purpose, her trauma into transformation. And she invited me here tonight. Not to humiliate me. I've done that to myself. But to give me a chance to use my story to help others understand the cost of hatred, the price of prejudice, the necessity of accountability. Patricia's hands were shaking now, but her voice stayed steady. I can't undo what I did. I can't give Mrs. Moreau back the peace she felt before I violated it. I can't erase the trauma or the humiliation or the fear. But I can tell you this. Prejudice doesn't just hurt its victims. It destroys the people who carry it. I destroyed my own life with my racism. I hurt my family. I lost my daughter's respect. I became a cautionary tale about what happens when privilege meets consequences. And the hardest part? Learning that everything I lost was built on a foundation of injustice anyway. My wealth. My status. My sense of belonging. All of it came from systems designed to elevate people like me and suppress people like Mrs. Moreau. She paused, letting that sink in. So what have I learned? That change is possible but painful. That accountability is necessary but humbling. That you can spend your whole life benefiting from injustice without even seeing it. Until someone forces you to look. Mrs. Moreau forced me to look. And I'm grateful for that. Not grateful for the consequences. Those still hurt. But grateful that I'm no longer the person who could slap someone and feel justified. Grateful that I'm learning to see people as people, not as threats to my comfort. Grateful that I'm trying to be better. Patricia stepped back from the podium slightly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope my story serves as a warning. Prejudice has costs. For everyone. And the only way forward is through accountability, education, and genuine effort to change. She looked out at the audience one last time. Thank you for listening. And thank you to Mrs. Moreau for having the grace to give me this platform, even though I did everything possible to not deserve it. The applause started slowly, then built. Not enthusiastic, not celebratory, but acknowledging, respectful. Patricia walked off the stage on trembling legs and sat down at a table in the back, trying not to cry. After the speeches, during the reception, people approached Patricia cautiously. Some thanked her for her honesty. Some asked questions about her transformation. Some just looked at her with curiosity, like she was an exhibit in a museum of human mistakes. Patricia accepted all of it, because this was her reality now. Being the example. The cautionary tale. The proof that consequences matter. And then Elena appeared beside her. Walk with me, she said quietly. They stepped out onto the plaza's terrace. The city spread out below them, lights twinkling in the October darkness. For a long moment neither spoke. That was brave, Elena finally said. It was the least I could do. It was more than most people would do. Elena looked at her. Most people would have hidden, blamed others, made excuses. You stood up there and owned it. Completely. Patricia felt tears sliding down her cheeks. It doesn't change what I did. No, it doesn't. But it changes who you are now. And that matters. Does it? Elena considered the question seriously. 2 years ago, I wanted to destroy you. I used every resource I had to make sure you faced consequences. And I don't regret that. You needed to face consequences. She turned to face Patricia fully. But watching you actually change, actually grow, that's been more satisfying than the destruction ever was. Because destruction is easy. Growth is hard. And you chose the hard path. Patricia couldn't speak. Couldn't process what she was hearing. I'm not offering you friendship, Elena continued, echoing what she'd said in that Target 2 years ago. I'm not saying what you did is forgiven or forgotten. But I am saying that I see your effort. I respect your transformation. And I hope you continue on this path. Because the world needs fewer Patricias from 2 years ago, and more people willing to admit they were wrong and change. She extended her hand. Patricia stared at it. This hand she'd struck. This woman she'd assaulted. Offering not forgiveness, but acknowledgement, recognition, respect for the work done. Patricia took her hand, shook it gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. Even the destruction. Especially the destruction." Elena smiled slightly. "Use it well." And then she was gone, returning to the gala, leaving Patricia alone on the terrace. Patricia stood there for a long time, looking out at the city that had once been hers and now belonged to a different version of herself. A better version. A humbler version. A version still learning and growing and trying. The confrontation was over. Not with drama or revenge or satisfying vindication, but with something more powerful. Mutual recognition of growth. The confrontation is over. Elena didn't need to destroy Patricia further. Patricia had already been destroyed and rebuilt into someone different. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Would you have wanted Elena to be harsher, or Patricia to suffer more? Or do you think this kind of transformation and accountability is actually more powerful than pure revenge? There's no wrong answer here. Drop your thoughts below because we're almost at the end of this journey, and I want to know how you're feeling about it. 3 years after the slap, let me tell you where everyone ended up. Because this story doesn't end with that handshake on the plaza terrace. That was just a moment. Life continued. Consequences rippled outward. Choices compounded. And the final accounting of Patricia Whitmore versus Elena Moreau is both more complex and more satisfying than simple revenge. Let's start with Elena. The Moreau Foundation became one of the most influential racial justice organizations in America. Within 3 years, it had an endowment of over $200 million. It funded anti-bias training programs in retail spaces across the country. It supported victims of hate crimes with legal resources and counseling. It created scholarship programs for students of color pursuing business degrees. Elena turned her trauma into a legacy. Moreau Technologies continued to thrive. The company crossed the $5 billion valuation mark. Elena stepped into a more public role as co-CEO alongside Damien, finally letting the world see the genius that had always been there. She gave keynote speeches, appeared on magazine covers, became a voice for Black excellence in tech and business. But she never forgot where she came from. Every year on her birthday, Elena visited her mother's old neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. She walked the streets she grew up on, talked to kids who reminded her of herself. Brilliant but overlooked, talented but underestimated. And she told them, "The world will try to make you invisible. Don't let it." She and Damien adopted 2 children, a boy and a girl from the foster system. Gave them the opportunities Elena had to fight for. Taught them that privilege is a responsibility, not a right. She built a life that mattered, not despite what Patricia did to her, but including it as part of her story. The slap was a wound that healed into a scar. And that scar reminded her why the work mattered. Patricia's path was harder, humbler, less glamorous, but in its own way just as meaningful. After the gala speech, opportunities started opening. Small ones at first. She was invited to speak at community colleges about accountability, at criminal justice reform conferences about the cost of prejudice, at diversity training seminars as a cautionary tale. She took every invitation, no matter how small the audience or modest the venue. She earned her undergraduate degree. At 48 years old, sitting in classrooms with students young enough to be her children, Patricia studied sociology and criminal justice. She wrote her senior thesis on the psychology of prejudice. Got an A. Her professor wrote in the comments, "This shows genuine understanding born from painful experience. Well done." Patricia cried reading that. She got a better job. Director of Community Outreach at a nonprofit focused on rehabilitation for people with criminal records. The pay was still modest, $55,000 a year, but the work was meaningful. She helped people rebuild their lives after incarceration. found them housing, connected them with job training, advocated for them when the world wanted to write them off. She understood what it meant to be written off. Alexandra reached out. 3 years after the slap. An email that said simply, "I'm ready to talk if you are." They met for coffee in Brooklyn. Awkward at first. Then honest. "I spent 3 years hating you," Alexandra said. "For ruining my life. For embarrassing me. For being the kind of person who could do what you did." Patricia nodded. "You had every right to hate me. But I watched your speeches online. Saw you actually changing. And I realized, you're not that person anymore. Are you?" "I'm trying not to be." They didn't rebuild their relationship overnight. It was slow, careful, built on honesty instead of obligation. But Alexandra introduced Patricia to her girlfriend, invited her to her community college graduation, let her back into her life in small, meaningful ways. It wasn't what they'd had before. It was better, because it was real. Robert never came back. The divorce was final. He remarried someone from Boston. Never spoke to Patricia again. And that was okay. Some relationships can't survive the weight of what happened. Some bridges burn and stay burned. Patricia accepted that. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Astoria, rode the subway, shopped at Trader Joe's, had a life that would have horrified the old Patricia. But this Patricia? She was content. Because her worth wasn't tied to her zip code or her bank account or who she knew. Her worth was tied to whether she was becoming a better person than she was yesterday. Most days she was. 5 years after the slap, the Moreau Foundation hired Patricia. Not as a favor. As a recognition that she'd become genuinely valuable to the mission. She became director of the Accountability and Transformation Program. It worked with people who'd committed acts of bias or discrimination, helping them understand the harm they'd caused and genuinely change. Patricia was uniquely qualified. She knew what it felt like to be that person. The one convinced of their own righteousness. The one who needed their entire world destroyed before they could see the truth. She worked with executives fired for racist comments. Teachers disciplined for discriminatory treatment. Business owners caught on video treating black customers poorly. And she told them her story. Not to shame them, but to show them the path forward. "You have 2 choices," she'd say. "You can spend the rest of your life making excuses and blaming others. Or you can take responsibility and become someone better. One path leads to bitterness. The other leads to peace." Most chose peace. Eventually. Elena watched Patricia's work from a distance. They weren't friends. Probably never would be. But there was respect there. Acknowledgement of growth. Once a year they had coffee. Discussed the Foundation's programs. Talked about what was working and what needed improvement. It was professional, cordial, real. And that was enough. The viral video of Patricia's assault never went away. But over time, the narrative shifted. It became less about the spectacle of a racist Karen getting destroyed. More about what came after. The accountability. The transformation. The proof that consequences could lead to growth. Law schools used the case in classes about hate crimes and civil damages. Business schools used it in discussions about corporate responsibility and public image. Psychology programs used it to teach about prejudice and rehabilitation. The slap became a teaching moment. Patricia gave a TED Talk. The day I became a cautionary tale. It got 8 million views. In it she said, "I destroyed my life because I couldn't see another person's humanity. And I got exactly what I deserved. But here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom. It's also a foundation. You can build something new there. Something better. Something real." People in the comments shared their own stories. Times they'd acted on prejudice. Times they'd been victims of it. Times they'd had to confront their own biases. The conversation grew beyond one woman's mistake. It became about systems. About how we're all shaped by privilege and prejudice in ways we don't always see. About how accountability matters. about how change is possible but requires genuine effort. Elena's foundation grew. Patricia's program expanded. Together, separately but connected, they created a model for addressing racism that wasn't just punitive. It was transformative. 6 years after the slap, Elena was invited to speak at Harvard Business School. She stood in a lecture hall filled with future leaders and told them her story. The poverty, the brilliance, the success, the assault, the aftermath. When Patricia Whitmore slapped me, she said, she gave me a choice. I could let that moment define me as a victim, or I could use it to create change. She paused, looking out at the students. I chose change. And that choice led to this foundation, these programs, this impact. Patricia's prejudice became fuel for my purpose. Her hatred became the foundation for my legacy. That's not forgiveness. That's alchemy. A student raised her hand. Do you think she's really changed? Or is she just performing redemption? Elena considered the question carefully. I think transformation is always a performance at first. You act like the person you want to be until eventually you become them. Patricia is performing accountability every day. And after 6 years of that performance, it's become her reality. Does that mean you forgive her? No. The room went quiet. Forgiveness isn't required for transformation. Mine or hers. I don't forgive what she did. I never will. But I respect who she's become. And I believe the work she's doing is genuine and valuable. She smiled slightly. Some things can't be forgiven. They can only be learned from. Patricia, meanwhile, was speaking at a community college in Queens. 20 students in a diversity and inclusion class. Most of them working class. Many of them people of color who'd experienced the exact kind of prejudice Patricia used to embody. She told her story. The privilege, the blindness, the violence, the consequences, the growth. A young black woman raised her hand. How do we know you're not just saying this stuff to rehab your image? Patricia smiled. Because she'd been asked this question 100 times. You don't know. You have no reason to trust me. I assaulted someone who looked like you because I thought my whiteness made me superior. Why would you believe anything I say now? The student nodded, waiting. All I can tell you is this. I show up. Every day. I do the work. I help people rebuild their lives. I speak to rooms full of skeptics and let them question me. I've been doing it for 6 years. And I'll keep doing it for the rest of my life. Not because I want applause. Because I owe a debt I can never fully repay. After class, the student approached her. My aunt got fired from her job for complaining about racist treatment. Your foundation helped her file a complaint and get her job back. Patricia's eyes widened. Really? Really? So, thanks, I guess, for whatever you're doing now. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. And for Patricia that was enough. So where does everyone stand now, 6 years after one slap changed multiple lives? Elena Moreau, worth over $3 billion. Running a tech empire and a foundation that's changed policy in 18 states. Happily married. Mother of 2. Recognized as one of the most influential business leaders in America. She achieved everything she was always capable of achieving. The slap didn't make her successful. She was already brilliant. But it gave her a platform to make her brilliance impossible to ignore. Patricia Whitmore. Living modestly in Queens. Earning a middle-class salary. Rebuilding relationships with her daughter. Speaking, teaching, helping others avoid her mistakes. She lost everything she thought mattered and discovered what actually does. Redemption doesn't erase consequences. It just gives them meaning. Elena Moreau, still Elena's partner in every sense. Co-CEO of Moreau Technologies. Proud of his wife's transformation of trauma into purpose. Alexandra Whitmore. Graduated from community college. Working in social justice advocacy. Speaking to her mother occasionally. Building her own life separate from her family's notoriety. Robert Whitmore, remarried. Working in a small investment firm in Boston. Never fully recovered his reputation. Pays his court-mandated portion of the civil judgment in monthly installments. The Moreau Foundation helps thousands of people every year. Patricia's program has worked with hundreds of people who've committed acts of bias, helping many genuinely change. And the slap. It's still on video. Still out there. Still a reminder that actions have consequences. But it's become something more. A case study in accountability. A proof point that consequences matter. A demonstration that people can change if they're forced to confront their worst selves. Looking at where everyone ended up, here's my question. Do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of choices compounding over time? Elena chose to use her resources to hold Patricia accountable. Patricia chose to either fight or grow. Those choices led to specific outcomes. Was that karma? Justice? The inevitable result of cause and effect? I want to hear what you think. Drop your perspective in the comments. Because this story isn't just about one slap. It's about what we do with our worst moments. Whether we let them define us or transform us. Whether we choose growth or bitterness when faced with consequences. And that choice. That's something we all face eventually. Because if you've made it this far, through 176 minutes of one woman's assault, another woman's downfall, and both their transformations, you deserve more than just entertainment. You deserve meaning. Let's start with the obvious lesson. Actions have consequences. Patricia learned that the hard way. Her privilege couldn't protect her. Her connections couldn't save her. Her last name couldn't erase video evidence of her violence. When you hurt someone, especially someone with resources and resolve, you will face accountability. Period. But here's the deeper lesson, the one that matters more. Your worst moment doesn't have to be your final moment. Patricia could have stayed bitter. Could have blamed Elena for being vindictive. Could have spent the rest of her life making excuses and playing the victim. Instead, she chose growth. Painful, humbling, relentless growth. And that choice, made every single day for 6 years, transformed her from a cautionary tale into a teacher. In a recent interview, Elena was asked, "Do you regret how hard you came down on Patricia Whitmore?" Her answer was perfect. "I don't regret holding her accountable. Accountability isn't cruelty. It's necessity. But I am proud that the story didn't end with her destruction. It evolved into her transformation. Because revenge feels good for a moment, but creating systemic change feels good forever." Think about that. Elena could have stopped at the lawsuit, at the bankruptcy, at watching Patricia lose everything. But she built something bigger. A foundation that's helped thousands of people. Programs that changed policies in 18 states. A legacy that will outlive the viral video by decades. She took her pain and turned it into purpose. That's not just revenge. That's alchemy. And here's what Elena would tell you if you asked her for advice. Your worth isn't determined by how others see you. It's determined by how you see yourself and what you do with your gifts. She grew up poor, black, female, in spaces that constantly told her she didn't belong. And she built a billion-dollar empire anyway. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. Patricia's journey teaches something different but equally valuable. In one of her recent speeches, she said this, "I thought my worth came from my last name, my address, my social connections. And when I lost all of that, I thought I'd lost everything. But I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost everything fake, everything borrowed, everything unearned. And once that was gone, I had space to build something real." That's the paradox of rock bottom. It's terrifying, humiliating, painful, but it's also clarifying. When everything you thought defined you is stripped away, you discover what actually matters, who you actually are, what you're actually capable of becoming. Patricia discovered she was capable of empathy, of growth, of using her worst mistake to help others avoid similar ones. Would she have discovered that without losing everything? Probably not. Some lessons only come through loss. If you're watching this and thinking, "This is a great story, but what does it mean for my life?" Here's what you need to know. First, your circumstances don't define your worth. Elena proved that. She went from poverty to billions. But her worth didn't change. It was always there. The world just finally recognized it. If you're struggling right now, if you feel overlooked or underestimated, remember, your value isn't determined by who sees it. It's inherent. Second, accountability is a gift. Patricia would tell you that facing consequences was the best thing that ever happened to her. Not because it felt good, but because it forced her to change. If you've messed up, and we all have, the worst thing you can do is avoid responsibility. Face it. Own it. Learn from it. That's where growth lives. Third, transformation takes time. Patricia didn't change overnight. It took 6 years of daily effort, of showing up, of doing the work even when nobody was watching. Real change is slow, uncomfortable, unglamorous, but it's possible, if you're willing to do the work. Fourth, success is the best revenge. Elena didn't defeat Patricia by destroying her. She defeated the system that created Patricia's worldview. She built something that will outlast them both. If someone has wronged you, don't waste energy on petty revenge. Build something so successful, so meaningful, so impactful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Live well. That's the ultimate victory. Here's what I want you to remember from this story. A slap that took 1 second created ripples that are still spreading 6 years later. One woman turned trauma into a foundation that's changed thousands of lives. Another woman turned consequences into transformation that's helped hundreds avoid her mistakes. Both of them became better versions of themselves through pain. That's the real story. Not the viral video. Not the bankruptcy or the lawsuit or the public humiliation. The real story is what they did with their worst day. Elena could have let that slap make her bitter. Instead, she let it make her powerful. Patricia could have let her consequences make her hateful. Instead, she let them make her humble. And both of them are better for it. So the question isn't whether you'll face hardship. You will. Life guarantees that. The question is, what will you build from the ruins? Will you use your pain as an excuse? Or as fuel? Will you let your worst moment define you? Or refine you? Will you stay stuck in bitterness? Or choose growth? That choice is yours. Every single day. Elena and Patricia made their choices. And those choices determined everything that followed. Now it's your turn. What will you choose? 1 slap. 10 minutes. 6 years of consequences. That's the story we just walked through together. Elena Moreau, a brilliant black woman, walked into a designer boutique just wanting to shop in peace. Patricia Whitmore, blinded by privilege and prejudice, saw someone who didn't belong and reacted with violence. That single act of racism set off a chain reaction that destroyed one woman's life and defined another's legacy. Patricia lost everything. Her wealth, her status, her family, everything she thought made her valuable. But through that loss, she found something she'd never had before. Authenticity. The chance to build a life based on actual values instead of inherited privilege. Elena, meanwhile, took her trauma and transformed it into the Moreau Foundation. She turned one moment of violence into a movement for accountability and change. She proved that the best response to hatred isn't more hatred. It's building something so meaningful that the hatred becomes irrelevant. 6 years later, both women are better versions of themselves. Not because of what happened, but because of how they responded to it. That's the power of choice. That's the meaning of this story. This isn't just about two women in a boutique. It's about every time someone has judged you by your appearance. Every time you've been underestimated because of who you are or where you come from. Every time privilege has tried to put you in your place. And it's about how you respond. Do you let it break you? Or do you let it build you? Do you seek petty revenge? Or do you create something that outlasts the person who wronged you? Do you accept other people's definitions of your worth? Or do you define it yourself through excellence and integrity? Elena chose excellence. Patricia eventually chose growth. Both choices led to transformation. And you have those same choices available to you right now. Whatever you're facing, prejudice, setbacks, people who don't believe in you, remember this story. Remember that circumstances are temporary but character is permanent. Remember that accountability matters. That growth is possible. That your worst moment doesn't have to be your final moment. Remember that you get to choose what you become. If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable about resilience, accountability, and transformation, please leave a like and share your biggest takeaway in the comments. What resonated with you? Elena's strength? Patricia's transformation? The idea that consequences can lead to growth. I read every single comment, and your insights make this community special. So share your thoughts. Tell me what you're taking from this story into your own life. Because these stories only matter if they change us. If they make us think differently, act differently, choose differently. Here's what I want you to remember as you go back to your life. You are not defined by what others think of you. Elena knew that from the beginning. Patricia had to learn it the hard way. But both of them eventually understood the same truth. Other people's prejudices, assumptions, and judgments don't determine your worth. Your response to those things does. You are not defined by your circumstances. Elena grew up poor and became a billionaire. Patricia lost everything and found meaning. Both proved that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. You are not defined by your worst moments. You're defined by what you do after them. Whether you learn, whether you grow, whether you use pain as fuel or as an excuse. Elena and Patricia both faced their worst moments in that boutique. And both of them chose to become better because of it. That same choice is available to you. Right now. Every day. So here's my challenge. Whatever you're facing, whatever obstacles stand in your way, whatever people doubt you or dismiss you or try to keep you small, prove them irrelevant. Not by destroying them. Not by seeking revenge. But by building a life so successful, so meaningful, so impactful that their opinions simply don't matter anymore. Live well. Grow constantly. Choose excellence over bitterness. That's how you win. Thank you for spending these 3 hours with me. Thank you for engaging with this story. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone convince you that you're nothing. You're everything you choose to become. Now go choose greatness.